thank you again for coming onto the show. The first question I wanted to ask you is just like, what were some of the obstacles you faced as, like a Mexican-American immigrant, or Mexican immigrant, and, growing up in the 70s here in Santa Ana?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. And, as I was saying earlier, I'm old, right? So I could talk to you for hours as to the different challenges in all the years that, we've had here in our beautiful country and city of Santa Ana. And we moved here when I was 10 years old, back in 1979. Don't do the math, because I'm only 29, that's what I tell people. But to the extent that there are challenges, there are challenges from the minute you set foot, right, in a different country, to the extent that we didn't speak a word of English, right? And we're down the street from the school I attended, Primary Elementary, which is really cool because this is like a second home to me. And we took ESL classes, and back then, this is many years ago, when you were an ESL student, you were not allowed to earn an A, if you will. Right? Even though you were doing A work, right, ESL students could only earn up to a C. So if you got 100% on your test on the sort, you could still only get a C because people looked at ESL classes as if they were minor or less, right, than your typical classes, which wasn't fair to those students at the time, right? Then it was assumed that because you didn't speak English, you also didn't know anything about other subject matters, right? So for example, in Mexico, schooling is so much more advanced in many different subjects, math, history, world history, you name it. So when we left Mexico, I was doing square roots in 5th grade. And when we came over here, they were doing the times tables, and we were playing this contest on, flashcards.
Yeah.
And my teacher allowed me to answer the flashcard in Spanish, right? And then they would have this contest every Friday. And because we knew times tables from 3rd grade, I was winning every time, but he would allow me to do it in Spanish. So soon, within months from when we first got here, we, as kids, understood there were several injustices in education itself because we lived here. Then we moved districts, we were tested as far as, our other skills and the sort, and next thing you know, we were engaged. And I'm not sure what happened there. Obviously, I'm very grateful of that opportunity, but it was also sad that I had to move districts for someone to actually give you a test and then realize that your potential is a little higher than everyone assumed just because you don't speak the language, right? So that was that challenge. Of course, the financial challenge. We moved, I'm thinking maybe 7 times before we finally settled down over to the west end of the city, and I attended Santiago High School. And that was actually very rewarding to me. I played sports, and I also got to meet a lot of my good friends this day. Went on to Cal State Fullerton, but I remember back then, we didn't have any money, right? So both my parents always said, we could only give you an education. We can buy you, a car or property, whatever. We could give you an education. So to that extent, choose the college where you could only apply to one, and they wanted us to stay local. So I applied at Cal State Fullerton and got in, and a lot of my friends in high school were Vietnamese, and they were all going to be doctors, right? And my mom's father, who I never met, my maternal grandfather, was a doctor in Mexico. So that was in the back of my mind. I thought I wanted to do that. But then I soon found out that I wanted to address injustices, and political science was more my thing, and criminal justice, right? And lo and behold, I switched majors after 21 units in biology. And went to Santa Ana College to try to catch up with my units because I still wanted to finish in 4 years because I knew that it was a sacrifice for my parents to be paying for my schooling and not my sisters. So long story short, that challenge is even through university were always financial. Not so much on the question, we got past that. And then of course the moving around, but eventually you managed that. And then went on to law school. My dad always said I should be a lawyer. I think I'm the son that he always wanted, right? So I did go into law school because I wanted to change the world. But that was also a challenge because, we weren't citizens yet, so we didn't qualify for a lot of the financial aid that available to now citizens. Oh, this is one of my people. There you go. Right side up. So we weren't citizens, and so we didn't have the advantages that a lot of our students have these days, right? So that I ended up getting loans. No regrets whatsoever because, as you know, education is priceless. So to that extent, that was a challenge too, and I ended up working through some of the time I spent in law school. But in law school, I went to work for nonprofits, the Legal Foundation over in LA. Still wanted to change the world. And then you soon realize that you gotta be either independently wealthy to be able to do what you want to do as far as litigation, class action litigation, or you gotta work for organizations, but with restrictions because some of their funding is federal funding, and that has restrictions on its own. So through working to legal aid, I did a lot of work with domestic violence victims and with a lot of seniors, and I learned how to do paternity lawsuits, right, and protective orders, and then helping the seniors out. And I decided instead of staying in LA and continuing to work with the Legal Aid Foundation, I decided there was so much work to do in Orange County. Because in LA, they're a little more sophisticated, a little more mature as far as politics are concerned. They've accomplished so much more than we're still doing in Orange County. So to that extent, I thought I could put my degree to better use coming and pioneering back into Orange County. So I came back and opened up my own practice and figured, hey, I'm going to change the world through that. And I hung my own shingle. And next thing you know, I'm getting a bunch of divorce cases. And I thought I didn't go to law school to, be in the middle of some fight, right?
Yeah.
But things happen for a reason, because through that, I met a lot of good friends that were working with the district attorney's office that were helping in enforcing child support orders and paternity lawsuits. And that's how I met them. And they talked to me about the wonders of the job, right? With the benefits, and you're able to do so much more once you're financially stable. So they talked me into applying, and that's how I ended up at the DA's office. Had you asked me that when I was going to law school, that was not in my wildest dreams. I wanted to change the world and work with the DA's office as well.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up at the DA's office. But it was a judge, her name is Frances Munoz, first Latina judge ever in Orange County, former public defender. When I was doing a lot of nonprofit work, even when I left law school, graduated, became an attorney, right? I was involved with a lot of nonprofit organizations here in Santana. She pulled me to the side and told me, that's great and dandy that you're doing these great things for the community. However, your loans are going to become due. You're going to have to pay a mortgage eventually, right? If you want to drive a nice car, that costs money. And to the extent that you want to help the community, you will be in better footing to do so if you have like a stable career, and you could come back like she was, for example, a judge, and was very much involved with the community. So I took that piece of advice and that of my other mentors, and that's how I ended up at the DA's. And the rest is history, to the extent that we've managed to still be involved with the community very much so. I have two lives, I call it, right?
Yeah.
I have my career at the DA's office. It's been 21 years, and I've been an elected official for 20 of them, and great work on both, right? And elected official, I get that need met, if you will. I need to help the community get met. I was on the council for 12 years. I was vice mayor for 6 of them. After that, I got termed out, and then I went over to the community college district. And this is my 8th year. I'm president of the board this year. That's the second time I get to be president. Challenging year. We can talk about that a little more, but it's been a great career. No regrets whatsoever. I think it's the challenges and the struggles that make you even wiser as to what it is, what it takes, what people are going through, and what the needs of the community are. And we lived it firsthand. As an immigrant from Mexico, right? That gets it. Went through the education system in Mexico partially, and then lived experience here, and then have managed to survive and overcame it, right? We're very, very lucky in many different ways, successful to the extent that obviously we define success these days, but very grateful for having had the opportunity and having overcome the challenges and having been able to help the community. So now with this golden opportunity to be mayor, not only do I have the most experience, but also my background, I think, is best qualified for the people that reside in the city of Santana. So to that extent, I would also be making history, right? We've never had a woman mayor in the city's history, 150 years. And it's not as if we're not qualified. I'm more qualified than our current mayor ever hoped to be. And no offense to Miguel, right? But to that extent, I mean, you look back at what's going on back then, what's going on now. I'm even a better candidate now than when I first ran for city council back in 2000. I was the first Latina ever elected when I won in 2000 as a councilwoman. I was only the 5th woman ever elected. And we've had some other Latina councilwomen since then, but never a woman mayor. And I think it's time.
That's awesome. So you mentioned from whether it's becoming the first woman mayor or just even playing sports, I wanted to ask you, did you feel like you grew up in a progressive household? Because at least in my family and in my experiences with other Mexican-American families, it seemed like women couldn't play sports. They discouraged women to go to college, at least in the older generations, right? Because it was more like, hey, stay at the house, kitchen, that kind of stuff. Because, it's big patriarchal family system, right? So did you feel like your family grew up a little bit different from that?
A little bit from what you just described, and I'm very much aware of the fact that exists, but to the extent, I'm not so sure if it's something that comes from the Mexico City background, if you will, because that's where my family is from, even though my father is from Irapuato, Guanajuato, and my mom's from Zacatecas. They've always inculcated a higher education to the extent that they wanted us to accomplish as much as we could accomplish. I've never ever had the pressure of having to get married, never ever had the pressure of having to have kids, never ever had the pressure of having to stay home and So in that sense, I'm very fortunate. And always, my dad always used to tell me, you need to become a lawyer. Because, it was only for women in the house, right? My sister, like I told you earlier, on the phone, my dad always wanted, right? But we would argue, girls argue. And from that, my dad always used to say, you should become a lawyer. So it was never a question of, what are you thinking in school? No, not at all. So to that extent, yes, a very progressive household. But as it relates to Latino families, they're also very conservative, as you know.
Right.
Right? People assume the Latino community is way to the left, and not so much. The Latino community also cares for public safety. The Latino community also cares to not waste money. The Latino community also cares for a lot of different things that people would think otherwise, just because they assume that because we tend to be Democrats, and I am a Democrat, we tend to go way to the left, and that's not the case, and you will see that at the ballot box.
Mm-hmm. Now you mentioned earlier Francis Munoz, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was it the first elected judge, elected judge in Orange County?
Latina in Orange County, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Were there any other mentors or just kind of people that you looked up to, whether as a youth or someone going through college, that kind of helped you get you to where you are today?
Well, I'm very fortunate in the sense that I've had a lot of mentors, but number one mentors, my parents, and the struggle that they went through to look for a better life, for us here in the United States, right? I mean, it was very courageous of them to recognize that whatever was going on in Mexico at the time was not necessarily going to be the best for our family back in 1979. The peso had just devaluated in value, right? So we were broke, right? And my grandparents already lived here in Santana in the Delhi neighborhood, so we were very much familiar with Santana. So when we moved here, it was seeking a better life, as we say that my family was. And we ended up moving a lot, right? And bounced from one house to the next, one of our own folks, and I was just in this home for about, in one of the houses in the back, for about 6 months, I want to say. And after that, we were on our own, right? To the extent that my father was working 2 jobs, factory jobs, if you will, and my mom was trying to learn English at Centennial Education Center. And we struggled. We struggled. I remember, we used to eat spam all the time.
Yeah.
Right now, I won't touch spam. Not because it's not it's a delicacy in Hawaii, if you will, but to the extent that we had those memories, through law school, we were living on a couple of dollars and tuna, right? So kudos to my parents. My hats off to them. I will always value the fact that they struggled to provide us with a better life, and they were successful in doing that. And they left it up to us, of course, to do well by them. And those are my number one heroes. So it relates to other mentors. I've been very fortunate. I very much like the Hispanic Bar Association, for example, an association that I got involved with early on, right after I left law school. And to this day, I'm very good friends with a lot of the lawyers that were already in place when I became involved with it. And they always told me, go get a stable job, do this, do that, and they have ideas for your career. And then they support you wholeheartedly, and they put their money where their mouth is. Not financial realistic, but they do open up for us to that extent. I've been very fortunate. Teachers, of course, I'll tell you, not a lot of people know this story. Back in 8th grade at Doig, there was this assignment on, we had to write a summary on some story, right? And I completely forgot, right? So the next day we walk into class and the teacher is asking for the assignment, right? I'm thinking, oh my God, that's right, he mentioned that at the end of the class, right? So I was reading it as it was collecting. It was one of those rewrite stories, right? And I started to write like 7 sentences. I'm thinking something's better than nothing, right? But I was panicking because even just knowing my parents finding out that I didn't turn in the assignment, right? And then he pulled me over, right? He called me over to his desk, and I'm thinking, oh, he knows I didn't even read the story, right? And he tells me, hey, I just wanted to point out that, in this summary, you cover like everything that's important in this story, right? And he always, it was Williams, what's his name, encouraged me to look into law school or look into English or something to that effect. I really in the English media. So there's definitely different people I could point to, but you remember those people, right? You remember Francis Munoz. Tony Burkhardt was a big supporter too, and a big mentor. He's a former DA. And, he had some controversial decisions that were made during his tenure, but some of them were very valuable. For example, taking on the Thomas Kelly case, the homeless man that got killed in Fullerton. The police departments were not happy with that decision, but the fact that he took it on spoke volumes to me that he actually was willing to take on a controversial position. Not because it was a popular thing to do, but because it was the right thing to do. And we lost that case, but it was... I think he gained so much more admiration by a lot of us, because he was willing to do what it took, not necessarily a popular thing. I've done that in the past too. And you know what? I sleep well at night, for the decisions I've made and the fights I've taken on. it doesn't kill you, makes you stronger, right? And to that extent, I think I am, and wiser too.
I think that's cool too. You can remember those stories because growing up, I feel like sometimes you forget a lot of some like memories, right? So things just pass up and you grow up kind of fast, but you can always recall like certain moments, right? And at least for me, like when I was in college or in high school, I can remember certain teachers either being discouraging or encouraging. Like the teachers that took the extra time, they didn't always do it, but like when I felt like when they did, they kind of push you to go to like another level, and that kind of, I don't know, I feel like teachers need to do a little bit more of that and just be a little bit more encouraging, because sometimes, at least through my school experience, we grew up in Santa Ana, but then we moved in middle school, when I was in middle school, to Orange, the city of Orange, and I just felt like, I don't know if it was the classes I was in or the teachers that I had, I didn't have like the strongest teachers. I actually had some teachers that were just kind of like very minimal effort and, you know, kind of just put in the minimum. But when I went to Golden West College out of high school, I felt like I was blessed to have a lot of like really encouraging teachers. So in high school, I never was really strong in English, and so when I took the placement exam to get into community college, I basically placed at the lowest English. I had to take 2 Englishes before I even got like an English.
Like a remedial stuff.
Yeah. So it wasn't even like, but it wasn't that I didn't know the language. You know, English was my first language, and it wasn't like that I was a bad writer. I just never had a lot of English teachers that put the time in. But I just remember the first English teacher in that first like class. She was like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "You know, like you're way like after our first essay." And she's like, "You know, you're way smarter than this, and like I know you're capable of a lot of things just reading off of this." And she just kind of worked with me and, you know, taught me how to organize things better, a little bit more better as far as like writing structure and that kind of stuff. And I just remember it just now, like I can say like I write and I enjoy writing and I want to write for like a living, you know, or like do maybe a book or two. But in high school I would never thought that, but I just thought that community college professor kind of like unlocked that side of me, and I was able to like overcome whatever obstacles I was holding myself and limiting myself to because of like the education that I had received in high school, if that makes sense.
Right, no, it makes perfect sense. It's all about the self-esteem too, right? And messaging that you get as a kid, right? Where, you know, you're only expected to reach a certain level because, you know, the color of your skin or your background or where about you live in the city or, you know, who your parents are, right? As opposed to more affluent neighborhoods and better schools, you know, where teachers, not that or teachers in Santa Ana they try very hard. There's a lot of them that, you know, my hat's off. But then there's those that, as you say, you know, have kind of like thrown that in, you know. And that's true of every district, right? There's those. But to the extent that we could overcome even those challenges with those teachers, it's important because our kids have such potential, right? Like we go through the DA's office, we have a program called GRIP, right? The Gang Reduction and Intervention Program. And we have 2 phases of GRIP. The first one is the enforcement one, where the kids are already in gangs and the parents are not really doing anything about it, and you start, you know, getting a little more concerned with it and you become a little more assertive with that group of people. But then we have the prevention one, where we show up, and that's where I volunteer, where you show up to the local elementary schools in partnership with probation and the local law enforcement and the teachers, right, and the principals have to buy into the program, and you talk to 4th and 5th graders, and we go and we teach them about, you know, the dangers of drugs, of course, the dangers of gangs, you know, what to watch out for, because you better believe it, they're recruiting, they leave out of school and they're walking home and there's your classic gangster trying to recruit them, right? And then we bring in the parents and we teach them in Spanish, you know, what to look for, like if their kids are starting to write, you know, in that funny writing and what it means, you know, we teach them to go through their schoolwork, to go through their backpacks. And then we have them get involved. You know, we have a greeter program where the parents volunteer in the morning and in the afternoon, and they greet the kids, and it makes all the difference in the world, right? You're getting to school and they say, "Oh, you know, how are you?" And you do your homework, or "How's your sister?" or the sort, right? As opposed to someone that doesn't even know your name. So we have the greeter program, and we have mentorship with the teachers themselves. We also teach the students about dreams, right? We give them a little box, and we call it a dream box. And that's part of my favorite parts of the program. We tell them to work on their box, right? And they have a week to complete it, and they put in, you know, they have to cut out things of what they dream to do or what they want in life, right? And then when they come back, they decorate the boxes, and then they have to present to the class as to, you know, why they decorated it that way. And then they have to show the contents of the box, right? So let's just assume this kid pulls out a Ferrari, right? So we tell them, okay, what are you gonna have to do to get that Ferrari, right? And we tell them about, you know, the value of education, right? What it takes to get to a university, you know, what it takes to get that beautiful home, and what it is to achieve their dreams, and how gangs or drugs or crime could actually prevent them from achieving those dreams. So to that extent, it's wonderful to see the little faces, and you see the potential, right? And you see the smart kids, but it's all on where you land, the messaging you get, be willing or able to overcome some of the challenges presented to you. So yes, a lot of injustices in a lot of our education systems. When we started our conversation, I told you right away I remember it, right?
Yeah.
You're doing A work, you're getting 100% of the test, but you could only get a C because the 10 years class, right? How fair is that to the students?
Yeah.
So to the extent that we could address this, we need to, absolutely.
And I think it's systematic too. I remember I had one English teacher again at the community college level, and he said he got to, I've only grown up here in Central Orange County, Santa Ana and Orange, and been in those two school districts. But he said in like other wealthier like neighborhoods or districts, you know, they have completely like different teaching styles, like to the wealthier communities and the wealthier neighborhoods, right? I just feel like sometimes, at least in these cities, they teach you kind of it's very like I said, very basic level stuff, and they kind of teach you to go into like a very like entry level type job, whether it's factory, whether it's like something that doesn't require a college education.
Right.
But kind of they don't teach you to be creative, and they don't teach you to think for yourself. They don't teach you to lead, I think, either. And that's one thing I stress just working with middle schoolers, is trying to like bring out that creativity outside, trying to think for themselves and lead in different ways. But because you could, like you said, you see these kids have potential. It's not like all these kids are just want to be, you know, just a number, right? Some of these kids do have these dreams and they have the work ethic, but because their family doesn't, you know, either immigrants or they just didn't have an education, so they don't know how to go about these things. So it's just putting resources in front of them. I remember as a kid, like I really didn't. So my whole thing, like going to college, when I discovered that you could become a sports broadcaster, that really inspired me, because like I didn't even know those guys got paid. Like I thought they just did that for free to talk about games.
Some of them make some pretty good money.
Exactly. But see, I was never introduced to that as a kid, and that's one thing I like, especially working through sports, is like, you know, everyone's dream, I think, especially me as a kid playing sports, and like all my friends who wanted to make it to the NFL, right? And a lot of times, especially as a Mexican, you know, 5'10", 200 pounds, like good luck, you know, you have to be really fast.
Right.
So, you know, we just don't have the genes for it, but doesn't mean you can't be, whether it's in the broadcast or maybe refereeing or even like graphic design, or, you know, there's all kinds of marketing stuff like that, sales, ticket sales, and there's other things you can do to work in sports. But I just feel like as a kid, like I wasn't really exposed to all that. So it was like, okay, well, I gotta make it as a player, or that's it, you know. Well, and there's so many other options when you can do, and
the possibilities are endless.
Right, and sports are kind of advancing, so that's like been a big thing for me, at least, seeing all these kids being so invested into the sport. It's like, all right, well, let's say you don't make it, like what's a backup plan that you could still be kind of involved in it, like, you know, and just teaching them about. I remember a kid asked me like, hey, like, you know, he's picking out classes, he was 8th grade going into freshman year, like, what's graphic design? He's like, oh, graphic design, like open up your Instagram, and he follows a lot of like NFL pages and stuff like that. So like, see that, you know, it was like an alert, like a team made a transaction, and I was like, you know, someone had to make that, like someone put the team colors together with the team logo, with the player, and then the money that they got for the contract. I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, like that's what graphic design is. It's just putting all those together on a layout so they can post it to social media, and so people like you, fans, can see it. I was like, wow. And he ended up taking the class. So it's just, you know,
and they can make a living out of that, right?
Yeah, exactly. People can make a living off that, and you're kind of still, even though you don't get to play the sport, you're still around it. And I think, you know, that's something you really love. You know, I think it's just as cool.
Yeah, but it's all about the messaging, right? I mean, that kid was lucky to have had that conversation with you, right? Because he probably wasn't hearing it at home, right? He was probably hearing a different message, like, you know, well, why don't you do something else? Or why don't you go help your dad with the yard if the father is a gardener? There's nothing wrong with being a gardener. They do very hard work.
Right.
But going back to what you were saying, some of the families expect you to get out of high school and work.
Yeah.
Or you're expected to do certain things and not go to school. Going back to your question, as far as a progressive home, I was very active in mentoring as well, young girls, and I was persona non grata in a house in Delhi because a young lady wanted to go to college, right? And the father just did not have that plan for her in life, right? So he did not like it when I used to go pick her up, and one time he wouldn't even open the door. So the little girl told me, hey, my dad's upset and he doesn't want me to go with you. He still wants me to just, you know, get married and, you know. So yeah, but I'm thinking, how does this still go on, this day in life? I mean, you're talking about maybe 14 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So I left, and then the mom chased me to the car and said, oh, she'll be out in 10 minutes, just wait for her, right? And they probably had a big nasty fight, you know. Yeah. But I was able to take the kid away and have a conversation with her, you know. So to that extent, we do have a cultural barrier within our families to get our kids out there. Yeah. And you were talking about college. One of the things I've realized, obviously, since my tenure for 8 years in the college district, college might not be for everyone. Like we know the traditional college, right, where you get your AD degree, you get your BA degree, you get your law degree, or you know, your doctorate. in other professions, But there's also so many other careers you could go into that don't necessarily require, a BA. As long as I don't have a fly on my hair, that's cool. Don't necessarily require a BA, right? Like, for example, water, right? Water is priceless. Water is gold, right? And it's a niche. And we have a program at Central Canyon College, right, where you get certain certificates and you're making $80,000 out of school. And you don't have to go through the trouble of a BA. It's obviously a difficult program, but it exists. Right? Or you have your nurses, or you have your apprenticeships, auto mechanic, culinary, you name it. But it's a question of, finding out what the aptitude is for these students and what it is they want to do in life. Because you got to do something you like. You're going to be doing it for the rest of your life, right?
Right.
But it's asking these questions early on.
Yeah.
So now we have a program called Pathways, where we work with Sanana Unified and all other school districts within the community college district we serve, because we serve 17 cities. And but in Santana, we do have the Pathways program where we start talking to the kids at an early age, 8th grade, and try to see what it is they want to do. And you might not know, right? I mean, you're 13. But to the extent that you think you're going to be the best mechanic ever, you start exposing them to those things and see whether in fact they like it, and if not, they could go to a different, path.
Right.
But we have bright kids in this city, and they deserve, all the attention they could get to make sure they're able to reach their strengths without the barriers. Whether it be a cultural thing going on in your house, or whether it's that teacher that doesn't believe in you, or that counselor that's trying to take you in a different path because you're only, in their eyes, going to achieve so much, right? Or whether it's just, society, the system, if you will, that thinks you don't belong.
Yeah. And it bums me out too to see like the lack of funding for like art programs and stuff like that, extracurricular programs in high schools or like the higher levels. Because when I grew up, I was able to take a woodshop class in 8th grade. But I remember he always told us that was his last year teaching it, and they never found a replacement professor for that or teacher for that. But my dad would tell me, growing up, even at Saddleback, they had a mechanic shop, they had a woodworking shop, but they also had like a steel working shop, and he made like things that are up in my grandma's house still to this day. So I felt like they had a lot more investments into those like programs, and you can kind of get the kids can take those classes and learn different trades, and whether they do it as a career or not, they kind of get to experiment with different things. Right. Where I feel like now, don't get me wrong, STEM is important, but not every person is going to go into STEM, and I feel like you have kids that want to work with their hands and maybe want to artwork more art-wise, constantly pushing math on them, they're going to end up hating school, and you almost like turn them away from even going to higher education or doing anything like that, because it's like, well, school sucks because I have to learn this math that I don't like and I'm never going to use, because they think a different way. And it's like, bringing it back to like the basic always picture, it's like it's a quote where you expect it's like every student is a different animal. That's how like the metaphor is. You can't judge a fish how smart they are if they the test is on how they fly. Right. Fish don't fly. Right. So it's kind of like a different thing. You have to find everyone's strong suits, and like you said, around middle school or even high school, like I think not a lot of kids don't know what they want to do, but they kind of have an idea of what their skill sets are
and what they like.
Exactly. I think more high schools and middle schools should kind of be more experimental, where they can kind of toy around with that and have a little bit of freedom to do that kind of stuff.
And going back to the trades, like the carpenters, you might be really good in math, but you don't know what you're going to do with math, and you're probably thinking, well, why do I need to do math? I don't really care for it, even though I'm good at it, right? But if you bring it out, you show the kid that in fact this is what you can accomplish with not necessarily math, but just being good in math, you could become the best carpenter ever, right? Or an architect if you want to go that far, or electrician work. Right? I mean, it's not easy work. It's certain aptitudes, right? Where they could see how these difficult math classes will actually bring them to something they like to do, electricity, and that pays well too. So we have these apprenticeship programs going on in our community colleges, but we gotta get better at getting the word out. I mean, we try our best, right? But to this day, still there's that whole, if you're gonna go to college, you're gonna get your, BA, and so we need to recognize that not everyone's gonna want to do that, right? And instead of losing them to them dropping out and not really accomplishing much or getting underemployed, it's better for them to find the skill, right, that they're good at in their life, and getting them better jobs.
Right. So going back to your political career, you ran for city council in 2000. What was some of the inspiration behind it? Just wanting to go out and branch out from the different things that you were doing there at the time.
Well, some people describe being politically active as a bug, right? You have this bug in you, right? You care, right? You want to address injustices and you want to change the world, right? And you want to help your community. So I very much had that bug. And when I first ran, we had a sort of diverse council, but what we had going back then, this is in 2000, right? we didn't have as many Latino faces, right? We had a city that looks like Santana that wasn't necessarily represented in those numbers, if you will, on the council. And you had to run citywide, but you had to live in a particular ward. But unfortunately, it was only certain particular areas in the city that were able to elect for everybody, right? So I wanted to, first of all, obviously help the community, but secondly, also prove that in fact, we were just as capable, right? We could also represent the community, and in some instances had a better understanding, and we're open to working with other communities, if you will. So when I did get elected, it's funny because a lot of times we thought, oh, it'd be cool when we have an all-Latino council, but then when we did, it wasn't necessarily all that great either, to the extent that other communities need to be served too, right? Yeah. And it wasn't as fruitful as I would have liked it to be. And I see that I did get to see that change at City Hall. And 2020 hindsight, right? Your vision gets clearer, right? When I first got elected, I was, as I told you, I was only the fifth woman, but we had an African American woman. We had two Caucasian women. One of them, my best friend to this day, Republican too. And then we had, prior to that, we had another Anglo woman, and then myself. Those were the only. So it was 3 Anglo women and an African American and myself, right? But on the council, we had 4 women, 4 out of the 5, which is kind of funny. Not only were we diverse that way, but we were also diverse age-wise. One of the women was in her 60s, another one in her 50s, another one in her 40s, and I was starting to hit my 30s. I don't do the math, I know almost. And then we of course had Miguel, who was mayor there already. Yeah. But we worked great, and we had an Anglo man who was also a good friend, who's running to replace me on the college board. But looking back in time, it's almost like your jury, right? You want a cross-section of your community, and looking back in time, you do need that. So to the extent that you have a lot of our youth running for office, it's exciting because they bring to the table experiences that we haven't had. I bring my generation to the table, I bring my experience to the table, but I'm still learning social media, and I'm still, to a certain extent, we didn't grow up in that generation, so it'd be great to have youth on our council along with experience. I think a combination of the two. And then diversity, of course, to the extent that at the end of the day, it's you understanding the community you serve, not so much, the color of your skin. You do have, obviously, the background, you do have the experience, and to that extent, of course, you speak in support and on behalf of that community, but you do serve the entire city, and to that extent, it's just about growth, growth and maturity as a person. And I think I'm better able to see it now, and even having lived that experience, and then having lived experience of an all-Latino council, and then we even had diversity then, right? Yeah. Because not all of us were necessarily from Mexico, right? You even have diversity now with the people that are running for office, right? You have one that's from El Salvador, one that's from Bolivia, one that has whatever generation from Mexico, one that's not, from any other non-American countries, So you have diversity even amongst the candidates. Yeah. But I think you reach your best solutions and problem solving when you have all different aspects at the table, all different perceptions, all different perspectives, and then you're able to address everybody's needs. So it comes to a solution that actually helps everyone, not just a particular group or a particular age, So it'd be interesting to see what the voters decide November 3rd. So I haven't endorsed anyone of the candidates that are running for council, even though, of course, everybody has their preferences. Yeah. Part of the reason I haven't is because it's such a golden opportunity for the city. We're going to have a new mayor for the first time in 26 years, right? Since I was born. Oh my God, that's right. Miguel's the only mayor you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it gets better because I'm going to win, hopefully, right? If the voters select me, then it's gonna be better. I think just different. I'm not saying that Miguel did a bad job. There's some things he could have done better. And I'm sure he appreciates that, and there's some things he did really well for the city. But to the extent that we need change, we don't need change. Yeah. So it's going to be better. It's a golden opportunity. Not only do you get a new mayor, but you also get at least 3 new faces, along with a brand new face we just got with the recall, right? Yeah. When a certain member of the council, former councilwoman, got recalled, right? She was replaced by an amazing person, and full disclosure, she's a friend of mine, right? But I've worked with Nelida Mendoza for years. I met her at the district attorney's office back in 1999. Okay. And when I got elected to the council in 2000, she was one of my commissioners, right? And then after that, we both ended up serving on the community college board, and we worked both together there too. And now she's the one that replaces Silvia Iglesias, and it's day and night. As far as understanding, she's a veteran, she's smart, she's good people. So I'm excited about that. Yeah. Because she's already the new face that you already know is going to be there. and then we have 3 potential new faces, right? And a mayor.
Yeah.
So as of December 15th, or whenever the turnover takes place, the change of power takes place, you have a brand new page with a lot of wonderful potential, if you will. And yes, I'm looking forward to working with our youth, with a diverse council, but I also bring a lot to the table to the extent that I've been an elected official for 20 years.
Yeah.
But I did step out for 8 years and let them be and let them do what they were going to do with the city. When I did raise my hand to run for the mayorship, it was pre-pandemic, pre-George Floyd, and I say that because as we recognize, those are 2 humongous challenges we need to address.
Yeah.
But before that, our city had a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
And it's very frustrating when you were there for 12 years in my place, right? I was there for 12 years. I know how it works, and I know the impact of the decisions that we were making at the time and how our city was just going downhill.
Yeah.
We were, firing city managers left and right, police chiefs. It was just a horrible mess. I mean, waste, neglect, you name it. So that's when I decided I was going to run for mayor because I know how to do the job, right? I was vice mayor for 6 years of the 12 that I served, right? And I didn't care for what was going on with our city at the time. I love the city to that extent, to have it land in the wrong hands as I see it would have been a travesty. So I did raise my hand to do that. Then we had the challenges of George Floyd and the pandemic, and being president of the board of trustees during that. Who would have thought, right? I mean, talk about a nasty year to be at the helm. It's given me a great experience. I think I've learned so much more this last year dealing with George Floyd and the pandemic at the college level with the 7 cities that we serve and the colleges that we serve, SEC and Sonoma College. I've learned so much more this year than I did in the entire 7 years.
Yeah.
Because we had to actually prepare for our students to come back in, and we have a plan, we're prepared, we're waiting to get the green light, if you will. But to that extent, we had to deal with all the renegotiation with the contracts. We had to deal with making sure that we address the digital divide. We had to make sure that the students, thousands of them that needed to graduate, graduated, right?
Right.
So we transitioned in 4 days. We pulled the plug on having to come in physically face-to-face classes on a Friday, and by Wednesday we were already operating online.
Yeah.
Of course, trying to catch and patch everything that wasn't working, right? As Santana has a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
Right, Santana, not only do we have very limited internet, but it's not reliable, right? It's pretty sketchy, and then we have unfairness, right, in a lot of our cities. Yeah, and to the extent that, let's just assume that you're able to get them the internet service, right? They're competing with their siblings for it, right? So then it gets even sketchier.
Yeah.
And that's assuming that they don't have a computer at home, right? And assuming that they had the equipment and they have the good internet and they're not necessarily computing, right? They don't have the space to actually do their homework.
Yeah.
I mean, even before the pandemic, we saw that issue with the kids not having a place to do their homework, right? Some of the kids are doing their homework in the restaurant because their houses are so retired. Somebody's somebody's living or renting the sofa or somebody, right? So you really don't have room to live, right? So to that extent, we have lived that with our students, and of course we address, the other needs that they have. The food, we also address the financial. We got CARES Act money, and actually Sonoma College got an award on how quickly we were able to disperse that money to our students.
Yeah.
And then we engaged in litigation with the Attorney General, with Claudia Alvarez, where the federal government decided that undocumented students weren't worthy of that help, right? And certain other students that hadn't applied for federal aid before, and some of them hadn't applied because they're not citizens, right? So they were trying to limit the resources to just a certain group of our students. So having decided to sue, and we joined in with this, and we won. So we were able to disperse money to our DACA students as well, and all the students that didn't necessarily qualify for that money. So we tried our best to make those needs. We've opened up some of our campuses to be able to send to even our parking lots to a library to be able to do the ourselves. And now, October 19th, tomorrow, actually, we're going to start to do more face-to-face classes because we do need to start coming back, in phases safely. We're limited to 25%. We have everything marked, the social distancing, we have the PPE, we have the disinfectants. We're doing free testing at Sonoma College for our students, such as staff in the Sonoma community.
Yeah.
And we're hoping to come back as soon as possible, as soon as it's safe, because it's the drastic impact, and by that I mean negative impact we're going to have in our education system. As a country, we're pretty bad. Yeah. Then as a state, we're not necessarily want to brag about.
Right.
And then as a county, we're not doing that hot. And in Central Orange County, we have a lot of challenges because of what we just talked about, right?
Yeah.
So the sooner we're able to bring our students back to the classroom, the better. We have a lot of surveys where they want to come back. I have listened to a lot of students. Sonoma College was 7,000 students.
Wow.
just right off
From
the bat.
spring to fall?
Yes, just because of the challenges, right? And so the administration has been calling every student as to what happened, how did you register, and then follow up, or what is it that, what need are we not meeting? What need are you not meeting on that? They want face-to-face classes. People learn differently in different environments.
Right.
So to that extent, we've had some people complain that other school districts are not coming back as quickly, right? But we are different. We're different in many different ways. Part of the challenges we face, other school districts and face, right? And to the extent that we could do damage control, we're working very hard to do. But going back to running for mayor, of course, that experience, I mean, I just gave you a little glimpse of what we've been through, right? We've had an infinite number of meetings and an infinite number of conversations and disagreements and agreements, and we have plans in place. But that was such a growing experience. Then we had George Floyd, right? You can't ignore the fact that George Floyd happened, right? So to that extent, we have a safety department on our colleges, and we're the ones that actually have to share something where a lot of our opportunities. So when that happened right away, I'm the chair of the safety committee. We called a meeting, and I invited the students, faculty, staff, and the chief, and we invited the chairs from the chairs to talk to us about what changes could happen, to talk about the curriculum, to talk about excessive use of force, to talk about cultural sensitivity training, to talk about all those conversations that need to be had. And we passed a resolution at the board level, not only to address the safety concerns with public safety people, but also just your systemic issues, right? We for years have been advocating to diversify our faculty. Because it goes back to you don't feel welcome in the classroom, or maybe you feel welcome in the classroom, but then you have those limits that have been inculcated on you for years, right? Where you don't think you're as smart as the next person sitting next to you. When you see a professor that looks like you, talks like you, grew up like you, right? There's a lot to be said for that. So we're out to address not just the police issue, but everything that's been systematic to the extent that we need to look at it. We need to have a conversation.
And you mentioned something earlier where you just said you've learned a lot more in this year than you have in past 7. I think that's what's cool about. I mean, there's a positive to look out of this whole situation, this whole year, is that we've had so much time to think and rethink different things in all aspects and everywhere. I think like with George Floyd, it's different because sports weren't going on, because so many things were closed and we couldn't go out and do different things. We were like forced to pay attention, and like more people were kind of on board. But this is like, that's been something like that people have been pushing really heavy since Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, in 2014. And so that was like, that movement's always been there, but then it grew by the millions. And it's just, I just see like so many different movements on social media at least getting traction because the pandemic stopped everything. And like me being a big sports fan myself, like I noticed like myself paying attention to more different things outside of sports, because hey, like for 6 months there wasn't sports, and even now like that sports have returned, it's like, well, I don't really care as much because there's other things that I want to address or want to help out or want to pay attention to, right? That require more attention. And not saying like sports is a bad thing, or going out is a bad thing, or going to restaurants or bars, whatever people do that were closed for so long. They're definitely kind of like distracted. Maybe it just put things to the side that we really need to address in a society, whether it's education, whether it's systematic racism, whether it's policing and how we keep public safety and how we address that. And so it's interesting. I'm glad we're having this conversation, and I'm glad I'm having this conversation with more friends that we never had this conversation before this year, but we're starting to talk about it because so many things stopped.
Right. But it puts things in perspective, right?
Yeah.
It makes you grateful for all the blessings you do have, and it makes you even more appreciative of how quickly we need to start working on the solutions. So it's golden opportunity to get that done. Now, November 3rd, we'll know where we're gonna be. It's kind of exciting. It's very exciting.
So you mentioned, being a city council person is a lot of work and a lot of, you want to serve the community. But how much do you have, I guess, freedom to, whether it's like call your own shots, or how much do you have, I guess, like what's the balance of working with the others, city council people and the mayor, and how much do you get to like do on your own?
You absolutely have to work with the council members. And part of, I think, the neglect that has happened in recent years at City Hall is because the council members were already showing sports, right? So it was, to a certain extent, they couldn't see beyond their noses, and they couldn't see the bigger picture. Some of the council members have this obsession with Miguel, right? To the extent that, yes, the man is not perfect. I will be the first to tell you the man is not perfect, right? To the extent that you can get beyond, right? I'm not disclosing this, but I did have a conversation where the mayor wanted a particular city manager, right? This is a couple of years back, right? And the council just didn't want to go that route because it was something Miguel wanted, right? So he asked me to please make a certain phone call to a certain council member that has to be, running for mayor.
Yeah.
And to please, assist in maybe convincing him to pick the right, city manager, right? Which is huge. The city manager position is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And we had already had all that turnover, and every time we lose a city manager, they let them go for capricious reasons. They're paying to the nose, and it's all taxpayers' money, and it's easy for them to write the check, but it's not their money, right? And then because we're spending that money, we're not able to provide other Christian services that our community very much needs, right? So I made the phone call, and one of the first things out of his mouth was, well, why does he not look at what he wants? So I'm thinking, oh my God, if you can't get beyond your obsession with the mayor or whatever, that you might have with them, to look at the bigger picture and what's best for the city, then we're more worse off than I thought. Right? So you have to work with other council members. And the beauty of this particular election is the first time ever that we have had other the council members actually get elected by districts, right? So they're only going to be elected by that little area, and I say little compared to the entire city, but it's a sixth of the city. It's not a little area, but it's a sixth of the city. But they're going to be held accountable to that area of the city, right? So it's great in several different ways. One, you're able to run for office if you're interested in running for office, and you only have to worry about the expenses of that smaller area.
Right.
Two, you're held accountable to that area, right? And so you work harder to make sure the area is well taken care of. But then there's also that caveat, right? And that's the concern I have, that council members might get too lost in not looking, past the trees, right? Not being able to see the forest. We have a wonderful city that's 27 square miles, and we got to look at the entire picture and serve it well.
Mm-hmm.
So there might be a need, say for example, Delta, right? That has a need to improve their streets. I'm just using a hypothetical. Of course, there's many streets in Delta that need fixing. And there might be another ward, say, ward, I don't know, 2, right? That has two. But they've drawn the line so many different ways.
Yeah.
But let's do this in another ward, right, on the west side. That has another need, but it's not as bad of a need. Are we gonna give up helping Delta just because this other council member is more vocal or has more juice to some extent?
Yeah.
That's the one concern I have. That's why a lot of people did not want the district elections, right? Because then people will start fighting over limited resources to try to place their ward under ward only. But I think the council members, because I've listened to all their different forums and stuff, they're very talented people that are running, and I think and I do hope that in fact they see the big picture. If we work as a team, I think we could accomplish a lot for this city. And if we're able to prioritize projects, and based on need, I think it would be a good fresh start. I've already had some conversations with some of them, and I told them, if elected, I look forward to working with you. And one of the first things I'm going to ask you is what are the needs in your district? And I'm hoping to have a retreat, and I know that we just had, they are having the general plan conversations. But they're also talking about what the plan we have for the city, right? And there's been a lot of interest in our community. But then you ask the community, and they say, well, I was never asked. So we have to rehash that plan, right? And have a conversation again with our community, and then move forward. Because some of these council members are going to be there for 12 years, right? The mayorship is limited to 8 years. 8 years is a long time, right? And we could put the city on a path that is, something that I could look back 8 years from now and say, wow, we got that done. Right? I will be truly happy and wholeheartedly satisfied and move on to, travel.
Right. Yeah. The 8's better than 26, right?
Well, that's good. That's for sure, right? Exactly, right? I mean, 26
Small
years.
steps,
Small steps. But you gotta have the vision, you gotta have the experience, and you gotta have the wherewithal and the willfulness to work with other people and address needs. And I'm not saying that we're going to agree on all things, right? But to the extent that we recognize that these council members are speaking for our city, absolutely, we need to work well together. So going back to, I haven't endorsed anyone because I want to see who Sanana chooses in their particular districts, and that is their choice, and then we're going to work with that person.
Well, speaking of choosing, in 2016 we saw one of the lowest turnout rates as far as going to vote, especially in my generation, my age group. But just I feel like in general, people just didn't go out and vote a lot. Like, what's your message as far as kind of getting out more people, especially in the community, whether it's, immigrant descent or Mexican Americans or just people of minorities, getting them to vote and get to the ballots?
There's a lot of apathy out there. I mean, I think people choose not to vote for different reasons, right? One of them is, of course, a lot of us are from countries where, politics just don't leave a good taste in your mouth, right? A lot of people are convinced that, politicians are all corrupt and that the systems in their particular countries are operating that way. So it makes no difference, how you vote. There's that. There's also the confusion, like, for example, where, Hillary Clinton wins the popular vote, yet, we have Trump as president. So I've actually spent some time on the phone explaining to people how that happens, because they will tell you, oh, my vote doesn't count, because this happened with Hillary. So you have to talk to them about the electoral college, which is a little more complex. But remind them that, all politics are local, and decisions that impact your everyday life I made at the local level, at the council level, at the school district level, at the community college level. So those particular elections are even more important. But not to say that the presidency is not important. I mean, look what's going on now, right? To the extent that our immigrant community is impacted, absolutely. Our LGBTQ community is impacted, absolutely. Our women community is impacted, absolutely. I mean, what a travesty that we might have an appointment of Supreme Court. And not that we don't necessarily have to take all perspectives. We just had that conversation about how it's important to hear from all sides, right? But if that appointment happens, the court's going to be so slanted one way that there will not be a cross-section of the nation speaking.
Right.
And all those interests, whether it be women or LGBTQ or the immigrant community, right, are just going to go down the toilet, for lack of a better word, because their voices are not going to be heard.
Right.
So that's why it's important that we are able to express our voice by voting.
Right.
And convincing them that in fact it makes a difference, because DACA students, they're hanging by a thread. Like we started a conversation earlier, Undocumented Student Week is October 19th, right, tomorrow.
Yeah.
And we have some great students out there. We're almost getting 5,000 between the two colleges. The number might have changed because of the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
But these are students with great potential, right? And we don't want them to fall to the wayside, and we don't want them to lose hope, right? Because they have taken that extra step to try to secure a higher education, right? Despite the challenges, right? They're still taking that step to try to better their lives, and they're good, right? And to the extent that they might get slapped around by the Supreme Court because of the appointments that are made because of the administration that we have in place, it absolutely makes a difference for the immigrant community. And there's obviously immigration reform, right? That's going to be huge too. I know there were a lot of promises made under the Obama administration that he was going to address that issue instead of when we felt, which is also important.
Yeah.
But there's some disappointment amongst the immigrant community that in fact he did not do the immigration reform that he very much promised, and the reason why a lot of people voted for him. Right. So to that extent, not only is it important that we vote, it's important that we hold the people that we elect accountable. Right. And so it is important that you do come out, or you, of course, they spoke up in numbers with the George Floyd. Right, protests.
Yeah.
And separating the vandals and the looters out of that, that's a little tiny segment that actually, if anything, sabotaged the movement, right? To the extent that we have these youth speaking up, we need them at the table, right? But there's this apathy too, where they're so anti-system that they see the system as part of, or the election as part of the system, right? So then they're anti-re-election.
Right.
I mean, if you elect good people that are going to do good things for youth, right, then you're going to have better results.
Right.
And, for example, I told you about everything we've done for our students in the last 8 years, right? To the extent that we have been able to help them, and we have been able to, they know that schools are safe, from ICE. If you will, we passed a resolution for the one that ICE is not working on our campuses. Obviously, they have a warrant where we can stop them because they're following law, right? But are we going to inviting them into our campuses for the fun of it? Absolutely not. They have to have a reason, and they have to have a warrant to be anywhere near our campuses. And we've made that, our board is actually very supportive of our Undocumented students, so we made it very clear to them that the solutions out there with mitigation. But it's not just about those students, about all of our students. But those decisions get made by having the right people at the table. And some of those conversations have not been had until we had people of color at that table. When I first got elected to that board, the college board, right? It was the person that they had elections by district. Otherwise, you would have to run all 7 cities to get one of those seats, right? And that's highly unlikely to happen, to have, a Latino candidate win in 7 different cities. It wasn't going to happen, right? So, thanks to one of our good friends, John Hanna, who's a big supporter and a Democrat, he pushed to make sure that we had diversity on that table. And sure enough, we went from, I think, 1 to 4. right? And then those conversations we had, and we started talking about diversifying the faculty, and started talking about the type of students, and we started talking about all the things that are important to communities we serve. That those conversations were making hard, but for having these people at the table.
Yeah.
So it's extremely important that you vote because it's very people that are going to be making decisions. That impact everybody's lives. I think I have the skills and the experience and the will, and the background to make it happen for us.
Right. And you mentioned too, I feel like a lot of people, especially in like my age group, are so anti everything. And there's people anti a lot of stuff, right, at any age group. But it seems like they're anti-politician, anti-police right now. How do we, I guess, change those attitudes towards that? Understand that we have the power to change those people in position of power, but also kind of like start electing good people. Right? We don't have to completely ditch the system that's in place. We just have to kind of reform it instead of kind of, obviously bad.
Right, it's like throwing the baby out with bathwater, right? or you complain about it, or then you do nothing for it, right? Or you choose that one person, right? Because there's people that will tell you, police are bad, and they will buy into that belief system, right? And then start messing with the police department, and then you have crime going up, and guess who gets victimized? Your community gets victimized.
Right.
So to the extent that happened, I'll tell you, talking about the police. I served for 12 years. I was chair of the public safety committee for 9 of those years, right? When I left, the year before I left, and it was after a lot of work in targeting areas where we saw the highest spikes in crime and different types of crime being done with the prevention work with the guns and we, of course, the enforcement. And strategizing as well. Forbes magazine ranked us the 4th safest city of size in Santa Ana. Who would have thought? In 2011, it was after all that work, right? I got turned down in 2012. I left in December of 2012. Within 2 weeks, they were walking out one of our best chiefs ever, Paul Walters, who had gotten awards for community policing, who had worked with us to strategize that way. Of course, my DA is criminal justice. I was able to put my input. They were not to take away from our officers, of course, it was. But that was going on when I left. And soon thereafter, the councilors that left, some of them running for office against me, started defunding the police, right? But it wasn't even thought of at the time, right? People weren't using the term. But sure enough, they had this anti-police vendetta. They started not funding them, right? Not filling the vacant positions, right? So soon, we started having a lot of vacancies in the police department, right? And the response time started getting longer, right? We weren't able to not only respond as quickly, but as respond as we should. And then on top of it, in police land, right, you want to get the best pick, right, of the people that want to become officers. Because you don't want people that shouldn't be holding a gun anywhere near a gun or having the authority, to walk around with a badge and then mistreat you. So you want to be able to get the best of the pick. In order to do that, you have to obviously have the money to be able to choose those people and be able to get the best pick out of the competition. So when these positions weren't getting funded, we couldn't be at the table to choose because we couldn't pay for them. Right? So we got behind Garden Grove and Anaheim, where they got the best of the pick they were going through the academy, and Banana couldn't even start to look when we weren't getting funded. So decisions like those that are, being made or were made after I left are going to continue to be made, and we're paying dearly. There's actually studies that show that crime went up when Canada started making decisions like that. There's an article in the Times that talks about that, where it says, careful with choosing to defund the police, and then they use Santa Ana as an example, and that was happening in 2014. And that was happening under some of the leadership of people running for mayor. One of the candidates running for mayor was an assembly member at one point, and he voted for 8109, which allowed prison inmates to be released into the county, without any funding. And when they brought him to the county, we had to actually put him in our county jail, but then we had to release other people that were in the county jail to make room for these guys. And now, he's claiming to be all pro public safety. I mean, he basically opened up the floodgates, right, to the one we have today. So we ask the community to be informed because, yes, two of the council members that are running now, they're a travesty to public safety. And they make it seem as if police are bad, but police actually protect us. I mean, there's a lot of crime that takes place in our community. Yes, are they perfect? Absolutely not. I've yet to find a perfect person, right? But to the extent that we can get rid of the bad officers that do exist, right? Those bad officers make the resident look bad. And then there is some learning to be done in the police department, not just ours, nationwide. Going back to the profiling, right? Going back to having cultural sensitivity classes, going back to proportional use of force, right? They said you don't bring a knife to a fist fight, right? but at the same time, and they're putting their lives at risk. So it's one of those, there's got to be a balance.
Yeah.
There's got to be training on how to handle certain situations. And in all honesty, we might actually see the pendulum swing the other way, where nobody wants to be an officer now, right?
Yeah.
And you might start getting really
good
bad
people, right?
becoming officers. So if you think we have a problem, now imagine if in fact we don't get good people that want to be officers either. And we have some amazing officers out there, that are Latino, bilingual, and culturally sensitive because they're part of a community. Right? They grew up in cities like Santa. And then we have some that didn't really have that experience, but are still very good people and very good officers. And there are some bad ones, and we need to address that and hold those people accountable, absolutely. And, we can do that in our role as DAs, of course, so we know that we oversee that, and we know what to look out for.
And it's something I mentioned before too, like definitely us as like whether it's the brown community, the black community, Polynesian, we have to encourage people of our communities to go into police and not. I remember as a kid, one of your friends said, "Hey, like I want to be a cop when they're older." They're kind of made fun of, they're teased, and this such. And sometimes even parents, uncles, or grandparents will discourage that. And definitely, I think in order to see equal representation from a policing standpoint, we can't do that. We can't continuously sabotage our own members of our own community to go into those like areas of importance, whether it's politics or policing or wherever, teaching, that kind of stuff too. It's important to have equal representation and get those people to understand, especially keeping it local. You know what I'm saying? Like someone who grew up in Santa Ana and understand the different types of culture and people that live here versus someone who's from out of state or out of town, they're not going to understand the same kind of concept and what it's like, and maybe thrown off by certain things when they see a banda at a party or something like that, and just different things. You know what I'm saying? And they might be quick to assume different things just because they're not familiar with the city that they're governing, about the policing.
Right. But we can't sabotage our own officers, right?
Yeah.
That would be really bad. And then to the extent that somebody's going to do the job, you don't want a bad person doing the job because the job's going to get killed. So we do want to encourage people to do people that are doing absolutely. I'm not defending the police. I know that the party wants that decision to be taken and they're vocal about it. That's just like that, the example 1 year that worked well with the police officers, not just in Santana, but several different departments. I used to be assigned in different courthouses along the county position, and police officers from other cities used to come up and say, "How do we get into Santa Ana?" Because Santa Ana used to be the department everybody wanted to work for, right? And then Santa Ana started, getting into city managers and messing with the police department, and soon that changed. So we need to bring it back to what it was. It's still an amazing city, it's still an amazing department. We need to do it by the city.
And it's interesting because like that message defund the police, right? Kind of picked up a lot of steam in the events of George Floyd and everything. But I think it should be like more relabeled as reform the police, right? You're not, because taking money away from the department, as you said, is gonna like hurt in a lot of different areas, right? But it's kind of redoing how they do things. And I've been reading and listening to a lot of different ideas about reforming, whether it's like new trainings and that kind of stuff. And there's different ways you can address policing without completely getting rid of it, like some people wanted to. And I just think, some people are very hopeful that like, oh, you don't need to be police. But then, we've seen events of that happening in like third world countries and that kind of stuff, and they're not always the ideal situation either. So you have to find you have to find a happy balance. And my hope is that it does get relabeled from defund the police to reform the police, right?
Or redefine, what it is they do, because we do see a lot of our police officers responding to the homeless houses blocking the sidewalks. I mean, what should they be doing then? Or if the situation escalated with a homeless person because of mental health issues, right? They have gotten a little more violent. That I wholeheartedly agree. They have been a little more aggressive. They are going to people's backyards and testing doorknobs. I mean, that's scary, especially if you live alone or you're an elderly person. So yes, that has to stop. They've been setting fires, right? And some of our neighborhoods are being placed in danger. Just last weekend we had that situation going on, where they set these fires and they think it's no big deal, but it costs lives, right? So yes, we have to address the situation and hold those people accountable, but we also have to look at the mental health perspective and the fact that it's not every program amongst the homeless. But to the extent that our offices are responding to more, more of the less of the stuff, right? They're blocking the sidewalk, and then the homeless person will get mad, and then there's this argument, and next thing you know, the person's in custody, and this is them in our jails, and it's a revolving door. So we let them go the very next day, and then they're back the very next week, right? And you get to know them by name, right? So to that extent, we at the college district, we recognize every September 11th, we recognize all of our police departments for the 7 different cities we serve, and our fire department. And we also, of course, we have the Sheriff's Academy and the so we bring them in and we recognize them. And since last time we did it all by Zoom, and we recognized Anaheim. Anaheim since 2016 has had a thing that they call PERT that actually involves two police officers and two professionals that respond to situations like that. So once the police officer sees a situation coming from home, nobody's getting beat up, right? Nobody's being taken, or there's no use of force, right? Or weapons.
Right.
Then the mental health people take that, and the police officer doesn't have to right.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised we haven't done it in Santana. I mean, the homeless situation, obviously, I think we all agree is way out of control. It's definitely a crisis, but it didn't have to be controlled that quickly. And I think people just neglected it, and it grew exponentially. I mean, I'm not saying that homeless people in San Paul left, but it was under control. We didn't have any kind of disorder, right? So to the extent that we neglected it, I think we did, and to a certain extent, the city is going to come late. We need to follow the city accountable. So there's a plan for that, to do that, and to continue suing, and then to take out. Fernando definitely has his share of the homeless population and responsibility to take care of those people that necessarily do belong to the city. But address the mental health, we shouldn't address the drug addiction. I mean, the drug addiction is there, and of course, because the drug addiction can be still to pay for it, right? And if they don't get it right, then they become more aggressive. Right? I mean, the drug itself has its mental issues. As you know, so it's a very sad situation, but it's something that could be handled. That has something. Or maybe to the extent that starting to it's a little bit of government thing, so it's going to be much better, but it's going to be to take on.
Right, because like you said, Orange County as a whole has a really big homeless population. What are some of those ideas to address, whether it's the drug addiction or just other areas of homelessness in the city?
Yeah, well, that's one of the big ones. And of course, we have the rural homeless shelter, so that's not a location. Right? Because nobody wants one in their backyard, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, I mean, yes, we take care of our own, but there's the same in Spanish, so one voice and just supposed to pass it. The good judge starts in his own home, right? Or her own home, to that extent. So we gotta do well by our residents, because nobody deserves to have their houses broken into, or the yards to be scared, or being, assaulted, if you will. But at the same time, we do have a responsibility to take care of the homeless that belong to the city, right? And not just, I'm not saying just put them in a house and that'd be it. Some of them don't want the house, right?
Right, no, yeah, that's the challenging part, right?
So, but do address, what it is that we need to do to get them off the streets.
Right.
And I'm not talking about incarcerating them. I mean, they're committing crimes, absolutely, but to the extent that it's a homeless issue more than a criminal issue, we need to address it. From the mental health perspective and the drug addiction perspective. There's a lot of great programs that are already in place. We don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
We just need to make room for that segment of the homeless population that does belong to our city, and make sure that other cities take care of the segment of the homeless population that belongs to them. Yeah. Right? And then the county needs to cough up the money they've been holding. I mean, they're spending out billions of dollars that are in terms of mental health issues that go directly to the homeless population. Just sit on that, which goes back to the elections for the county board of supervisors as well, right? It's pathetic that to this day Sonoma doesn't have a representative, right? It's sad, it's very sad. We're the county seat, and we're the biggest city in that particular district, and we don't have a representative. That's something that to be addressed.
Yeah.
One step at a time. So hopefully we see some change there too. Or at least if the person doesn't change, at least some leadership in making sure that the homeless situation gets addressed for us. Because so deserves it.
Yeah. And it's something from my time in college, I've gotten to travel a little bit, and I feel like there's homeless people in every city, right? From Kansas City to St. Louis, Dallas, Sacramento, San Francisco, there's homeless people everywhere. I wanted to ask you a bigger picture, do you think like we are capable of living in a society where there is no homeless people, whether it's a small level or at a nation level?
I think there's always going to be a homeless population, right? It's part of, humanity, if you will, like I told you, but there's a difference between having the crisis that we have here today and having the more controlled environment population, if you will, that we've seen in other cities. San Francisco's out of control. LA's out of control.
Yeah.
Right? Sonoma doesn't need to do that, and we weren't that. Just, 8 years ago. We don't know.
Yeah.
So I think we're still timely to address it and address it aggressively.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be unrealistic to say that we're going to get rid of homelessness altogether.
Yeah.
Some people choose to be homeless,
Yeah.
right? But to the extent that they're impacting the quality of life of other people, that needs to stop. So I think we'll have some, but not to the level that we have right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's neglect
Yeah.
at the county and it's neglect by the city.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like after when we moved to Orange, I lived off Catella, and we stayed pretty close to the riverbed. But you know, up until 2015, I think is when they started kicking homeless people out of the riverbed. There was huge, little communities of people just kind of shacking up with tents, and where it was like, you ride down the riverbed trail on a bike, and you see like probably like hundreds, maybe even thousands of people living up, facing Interstate and facing the Honda Center. And it was interesting to see when they did kick people out. I was in college at the time, just like, hey, where do all those people go? And my parents would tell me different stories about like local shops or local businesses kind of being affected by those people being kicked out, and they would harass the owners or gas stations or anything like that, and that kind of stuff. So it's a tricky situation. It's like, it's something, like you said, it almost seems like unavoidable. There's always going to be a small percentage. But it's like, how do we at least clean it up? Like, how do we change that? Because it just seems like it's growing like ever more. And like I said, it's everywhere too. Every big city, every semi-big city, like it's always a problem. Like how do we get those numbers down?
And then also some of the conduct they're engaging in is pretty dangerous. They could get trapped, right? Because people don't know that they're just looking for water. I mean, some of them are going to people's houses and not going to the refrigerator, or they just want to take a shower, right? Yeah. And you think, well, there's 2 people who are taking a shower, but then you're coming into somebody's home, right? You also have the arsonists, right? Selling flowers and you could put lights. We have a place not too long ago where somebody's patio furniture got set on fire because they said one of the homeless people set a fire on the street, right? And he caught on to some of the guys, trees that we have out there. And so no, you could buy fire fire neighborhood with you. Some of our businesses are getting impacted. We have one on Standard and First where the homeless woman decided to just put that on fire, right? So the loss is to the community, right? Like the people. So in the diocese, the other day, he was showing me how the homeless woman that is typically very peaceful, like he knows my name, who he just put to many a time, became aggressive, and he wasn't sure if she was on some drug or getting drug attacks, right? But she started tipping tables over and throwing chairs, and it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and how is that to our business owner, right? So then you have the other extreme where, we all love downtown right? That is really, we used to have these beautiful benches there, and then one day they all disappeared. And they decided to take them away because they were on homeless there. I'm thinking, well, then nobody gets to sit.
Right.
I mean, how much sense does that make? Right?
Even like bus stops too. They're trying to take away those.
Right. So you gotta be reasonable in your solutions, right? And it's not like that eradicated the homeless population, right? So I thought it was just crazy. And then when somebody called them on it, they said, oh no, I'm just bringing new benches.
Right. And it's interesting, different cities, but in Anaheim, near Disneyland, there's a lot of homeless people that sleep on those benches, and obviously they don't want to see that, or they don't want the tourists to see that out of state, out of country. So they took away some of those benches, but there's still like homeless people hanging out at those bus stops. So it seemed like the owners did no good. Sure they're not on the bench, but they're still like right next to the area, on the floor, and exactly. So it's just like taking them away wasn't a clear-cut solution.
Come back to your bike trail example, right? I mean, hopefully you were able to travel to the bike trail without people in your way or leaning on putting a knife to your neck, because those things were happening. If people couldn't ride their bikes anymore, and they would, get involved, right? And going back to the drug addictions and the homeless, but how did it get that far? How was it allowed? It's not like it happened overnight, right? The solution, none of us can change overnight, but we gotta get on the right path. Someday get there, right? So the whole thing with the bike trail, we've got to put a whole lot of other people to come to this, right? And then even amongst the homeless population, they have their own set of rules. They have their own policing, and then they have their own, and there's a lot of crime that happens amongst them. I mean, the assaults that take place amongst them, right? They're bringing themselves up in middle bars, or they're assaulting women left and right, and they don't talk to take against each other, with the whole snitching. They police themselves, but we don't live in a society where you get to make up your own rules, right? So it's not the wild, wild west anymore, right? To that extent, we need to get the situation under control.
So we've talked about homelessness, policing, as well as education, but what are some other areas of importance that you really want to address if you're elected mayor?
Well, we have a humongous issue with the economy, right, because of the pandemic, right? First of all, I know the city is working on addressing the pandemic, but I think that too was a little bit Johnny come late, right? They didn't start the testing until very recently, right? And then the way they're going about the testing, I don't think it's been a very wise approach, right? What I'm hearing is that they're going to neighborhoods, but they're going on the day the sweeper shows up, right? And people come out and they hope that people come out to move their cars, and then people are upset that they can't put their car back. And we have overcrowded neighborhoods that have very little parking.
Yeah.
And, when you choose to move your car because the sweeper's coming, you come out to get your car back in place, and the next thing the city's there, right?
Yeah.
And they're trying to test you, and you can move your car, and they're telling you the day off, right? Or they're leaving these little door hangers the day off. So some of the people that saw it is because they were on their way to work, and they were giving this test during the day when a lot of our people are working. And then the ones that weren't were not, open to taking a test. When they're closing down the street, you can move your car, and then they have police all over the place, right? I don't know that it was necessary to have a police out there, right? So, I'm not saying that there's a perfect system somewhere, but mistakes were made, and to the extent that they can bring up, I think we need to do that a little better. I think we were lacking in education. I think we should have put the word out a little earlier as to, the pandemic and, the importance of wearing masks and washing your hands and doing social distancing, because it got out of control. We are not the biggest city. We're the second biggest city in the county, yet we're the first one when it comes to the pandemic, right? To the extent that there was zero education, we still hear about people throwing major parties, right? 50 to 75 people in a small house with a small backyard, throwing their music out and no mask, and then they go to work the next day and, catch this pandemic in 2 seconds. So I think we could have done a better job with education, and we could have done a better job in, making sure we had to test them. I think we do need to contact tracing. I know that some people might find it a little bit invasive, but there's a lot of ways to work around it. People know that in fact I'm not going to be calling authorities. And the damage control, right? So I get to see the city have a plan. I know that the colleges have a plan. I can tell you about that plan. So to that extent, one of the first things I want to see is what plan we have. Not only obviously the education, the contact tracing, the prevention, right? But also the economy. It's huge. When we look at a $19 million deficit this last time around, and they filled it, yes, with unrestricted funds and with research. Those research were in place because when I left the council, we had just gone through the 2008 recession, right?
Yeah.
And in government, you get the hit following. You're not necessarily the year that the recession happens. We got hit in 2009, 2010. So we restructured the way we did business and the budget, if you will, and then we created a reserve tank. And not too long ago, the council members were talking about, we have extra money, how are we going to spend it? And then they were fighting over how they were going to spend these alleged, millions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
And how do we go from that conversation to we're in the red, and what are we going to do? And now we're going to have to take the reserves and use one-time funds. And they laid off 200 employees. 200 employees, and there wasn't even a conversation had with the union, which is not fair either, right?
Yeah.
So you have 200 people unemployed, right? That maybe some of it could have been prevented, maybe some of it could have been placed in charge where you could do the testing and this work, but we need to see where the mistakes are. Maybe not to come after people, absolutely not, but to fix it, so that we learn from them and then move forward. So we need to address the budget. We need to help our business community. As you know, Santa has over 30,000 small businesses. And particularly, we're an immigrant community, right? I mean, my parents, I tell you, they're the ones, naming heroes, they're the ones I would name. I said, well, each and every time. They struggled. Once my dad was able to get on his feet after working in different factory jobs, he saved enough money to open up a small business in downtown Santana on 4th Street. Yeah. And it's a very small business that paid for my education and that of my sisters around with that education, right? And to that extent, you get to see the struggle of this small business, these businesses that we have out there. Because it's not just your storefront guy that's selling you whatever, right? It's the families that they're supporting, right? Yeah. It's what they're taking home. It's what the dreams that they're helping accomplish, right? And it's their livelihood. It's how they pay for insurance, how they pay for their rent or their mortgage, right? Yeah. So they need to get back on their feet. They had to close for 3 months, and then once they started opening it up, they had to board up their stores, right, because of the protest. And now they're trying to come back. Yeah. So I think we could have done a better job in educating them as to the resources that are out there, because a lot of our businesses are Vietnamese speaking or Spanish speaking as well, and they're not that educated as to the resources with the FIRST Act, right? The FIRST Act is something new to all of us, right? So that takes some getting used to the roads, but to the
Yeah.
extent that we could get these resources in their hands to make sure that they're able to come back.
Yeah.
So there's the livelihood of our city. People are demanding certain services, and yes, very much so. We need to get our youth program back in order and the recreation centers open back up, and we need to rehire these people. But how are those things going to get paid for if we don't have a thriving economy? There's also our community is underemployed. Those that haven't lost their jobs, they have jobs that could pay better,
Yeah.
right? Or they have better abilities for better paying jobs, if you will.
Yeah.
So we need to find people jobs. We need to get them pre-employed. And as I tell you, we have apprenticeship programs in our colleges. So the experience that I bring with me now to the table coming back to City Hall will be that of the 8 years that I served with my college work, because you get a bigger perspective as to the role that the city could play,
Yeah.
the glue that the city could play between the education that you're, making sure happens and getting that job.
Yeah.
So we need to create that pathway between the actual degree and certificate to the actual job.
Yeah.
And the city has a lot of skills and a lot of potential, and a lot of smart people.
Yeah.
A lot of people that are hardworking, that are just looking for the opportunity to, put in the work.
Yeah.
So,
And just sorry to cut you off. You said livelihood of the city. I think it's like the livelihood of the nation to have small business and
Right.
opportunity to, right? Because other countries don't have the necessary opportunity. It's part of the American dream, whether you're an American like born here or someone who migrated from here. You have the opportunity to start something, whether it's a restaurant or a local dry cleaning or laundromat, whatever it may be, and you can earn a wage like that. And that's, I remember listening to a lot of different things and reading up on stuff where if we went corporate, like if corporate America took over everything and all small businesses went out of business in this country, like it'd be terrible, basically,
Right,
what I got
right.
out of it, because they can kind of control prices and they don't think about the small people here and there. And something like even as simple as like restaurants, like there's places where you can go to where it's like flame broiler, and they have like a cookie cutter very style, but then you can go to like a Moss or like just other teriyaki places. They do things very differently and provide different tastes and variety. And sometimes you get more bang for the buck, sometimes it's cheaper because they do local stuff, they're supporting local communities and stuff like that. So it's just definitely like buying local, whether it's food, stores, anything. Like I'm definitely, that's something that I've taken out of this pandemic a lot harder too, is like pushing more local stuff, because that's what keeps America, I think, the opportunity for the American dream.
And we can make it happen in our city. But as you know, we have that horrible tax that got passed. I voted against it, Measure X, right? We're the most expensive city in the county. There's very little to show for it. And then a lot of people are not only upset about having to pay a higher rate for sales tax, right? But on top of it, the promises that were made us to have a 9% reduce and working right? So there's a lot of people that are not happy with the tax. But you got setting aside that, and yes, I think that it's very well reasonable to be upset about that tax. Our small businesses are getting hit. People are realizing that you can go across the street to Garden Grove and pay less, right? For that hammer you need to buy, right? Something so small gets so big, right?
Yeah.
Same with buying a car,
Yeah.
right? Carrier BMW is one of the biggest facilities we have out there worldwide, and it's in Santa Ana, right? But to the extent that yes, people are not going to be shopping for that, but they're shopping for even a lesser car to some extent. Why would they, want to buy it in Santa? Now, I use that as an example, yet it's a little bit of a bad example, because when you buy a car, it's based on where you live, the tax, right? So you could try to go to Irvine, right, and get the car there, think you're going to pay less because of the sales tax. They'll ask you where you live, and they'll give you that tax, right? So either way, they still messed you up, right? Because you still have to pay a higher rate for your car because of that. So what the city did, thanks to the car industry asking, they did a rebate program of $500. But when you do the math, $500 doesn't make up for the higher tax rate, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like a year, right? So it's not fair to our businesses, it's not fair to our residents. I know that some of my contenders advocate for helping the financial strapped families. Of course, everybody wants to help the financial strapped families, but why make it worse for them, right?
Yeah.
Who are already bad off, and then on top of it, you throw in a sales tax that makes it more expensive for you to go buy rice and beans, right?
Yeah.
Or your everyday essentials. So people are not thinking it through, or they're just trying to roll over. And I think for that and many other reasons that we talked about today, I think we do need new leadership, but not just any leadership. We need experienced leadership. So I think it'd be exciting to get some of our youth elected, and to bring some diversity at the table, and to get experience at the table too, and start fresh. It's exciting for our city, so hopefully we're celebrating in the very near future. And making history as the first woman ever, that right woman that's qualified, that could best serve our community.
Well, before you wrap things up, are there any other goals outside of politics and just that, personal things that you would like to accomplish the rest of this year or going forward?
Well, I think everybody's depressed with the pandemic. Everybody's so fed up with the pandemic. I think to the extent that, every day that goes by, I think, well, maybe this time next year we'll just be, thinking, thank God that's over. 2020 has been a bad year for all of us. And yes, you count your blessings, but hopefully we're better, bigger people. And I know I've grown as a person, because of this experience, and that we learn from it. And as we talked about everything that's happened this year, it puts things in perspective.
Yeah.
Right? So I hope that we are not only just a better city, but a better community. And to the extent that I could help that happen, I will. Right? Personally, I love to travel. Right?
Yeah.
Got a trip in early in the year, like way in February, not before the pandemic exploded, but to that extent, I do look forward to a personal life a little bit, and to get in, down to business, rolling up our sleeves and helping where we can. If it's not in the cards, you know what? I'm wholeheartedly satisfied with the 20 years I've given, our community for service, right? I don't know what the future holds, right?
Yeah.
I hope it's the mayorship.
Yeah.
I will be very thrilled if it's in fact the mayorship. But if it's not the mayorship, then that means there's something better out there for me, where I could be of better use. But I do want to become mayor. I think I have the best skills. I think I'm the most qualified, and I think I could bring the city forward. So to that extent, don't get me wrong, vote for Alvarez between now and November 3rd. And as we talked about now, it's so crucial that our presidents go out to vote. It's going to speak volumes. It's a big, important year. Not only because of all the issues that we don't really talk that are going on in the city, but nationally.
Right.
We have so much to lose.
Right.
And you might think, okay, my vote doesn't make a difference nationally because of the electoral college, but it's so close because it speaks volumes as to, whether these communities care.
Yeah.
Going back to the census.
Yeah.
Right? They take us for granted that people not filling out their census packet. Right? It goes back to, people not necessarily caring, to the extent that they run us over. Like, can't even go to supervisors, right?
Right.
How is it that we're the biggest city in that district and we are yet to have a Senate representative? And when you don't elect a Senate representative because our community doesn't vote, right, then you don't get your services provided because the people that are sitting there know that you're not going to vote and you have zero to do with them sitting at that chair.
Yeah.
Right? So we don't get a person that's responsive to our needs, that we be held accountable, then we then have to explain why is it that we have the homeless population exploding in our city with zero resources that belong to our city not being trickled down, and all the shelters being built here.
Yeah.
So it's important. It's very important. So please go out and vote. Vote Alvarez. Claudia Alvarez for me.
And before we wrap things up, I do like to end the show with a few fun questions just to help the listeners get to know a little bit more about your personality.
Well, they were all fun questions.
If you could talk to any person dead or alive in history, who would it be?
Oh, dead or alive. Wow, that's a good one. Probably Kennedy.
Okay.
I would love to talk to him.
Yeah.
I'm staying in the political, world. He was. We were talking about him and that election in particular, and people think that he won by a landslide, and he didn't. There was a lot of struggles and a lot of news, and he made history in a lot of different ways. He was protected to every election. And the struggles that he faced, and yes, he came from a Christian family, but he had a lot of challenges. I would love to go back to that era and learn from him. But there's so many different ones. That's the first one I thought of because I'm thinking of the presidential level.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. If you were stranded on an island but you had food and water provided, what are 3 things you'd like to bring to pass the time?
A book.
Okay.
But I'm thinking of the Twilight Zone episode, and I'm probably dating myself. You know the Twilight Zone, right? Where the guy was, he wanted all the time he could, to have so that he could do pleasure reading, right? And then when he finally gets, all the books in that one place, he's alone, his glasses break. So then he can read the book,
cool.
right? So,
all right.
Yeah, or writing materials, right? So I could write a book.
Okay, so book, writing materials.
Yeah. What else? Well, no, I wouldn't bring a TV. I wouldn't bring Netflix with me, no. Probably something to do, work with my hands, I've always wondered if I have any talent there. I think I know the answer to that. It's a big fat no, but,
You never know till you try.
Yeah, if I'm going to have endless resources as far as food, right?
Yeah.
Then maybe not on how to grow your own food, but, definitely something to entertain myself.
Okay.
A sailboat. I mean, am I by water? Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
on the island, right?
Okay, yeah.
Not necessarily a sailboat, but something where I could actually play with the water.
Okay, sounds good. If you could have any toppings on a pizza, what would they be?
Oh, Okay, so some people highly criticize me because I do like Hawaiian pizza. And they say, oh, how is it that you like Hawaii pineapple and such different things?
Yeah.
To the extent that sometimes we would order pizza at our board meetings before the pandemic, and one of our presidents at the time actually, came into my taste. So it was always that one, pizza that had this experience. But no, I think, well, I like that, but I also like definitely mushrooms. Definitely something spicy. And Canadian. But nothing better than Napoleon pizza. Napoli, you gotta go taste.
Napoleon pizza?
Yeah.
What is that?
From Naples, in Italy, you gotta go taste the pizza. It's like absolutely the best pizza ever. And Chicago is second to that.
Oh yeah, the beaches.
Yeah, and then New York.
Or isn't that third one?
New York?
Oh, New York.
Yeah, New York pizza is absolutely delicious. So between Chicago and New York, I think I like Chicago better.
Yeah.
But the absolute best pizza, Napoli.
And it's hard to find deep dish. I mean, obviously we're on the West Coast. And pizza's done differently here, but I can only think of like one place where I've had deep dish pizza where I'm like, oh yeah, I'll go back to it.
Yeah, like the authentic with that crust, right?
There's this place called Selma's, but it's only in South County. It's like Mission Viejo, RSM, San Camilo. So, but that has really good deep dish pizza.
I'll have to check it out. Very cool. And bring one to Savannah.
Yeah, right? Exactly. And then last question, if you could give any advice to your younger self, what would it be?
I'm very blessed. I've had a blast. I have no regrets. I've learned from a lot of experiences I've had. I would say take the time to smell the flowers because one of my paralegals brought it up to my attention the other day because I'm always saying I can't wait until this day. I can't wait until that other day. Right? So like I've been saying, I can't wait until election day. Right? So she told me you're always waiting for something to happen, right? And you're not like appreciating the everyday experience, right? So you gotta take the time to smell the flowers, right? And they do tell you don't wish your life away.
Yeah.
So live every day as if it's the last one, right? And enjoy the time that you're passing. I mean, it is not necessarily a destination, but the trip itself. So going back to the election, we're wrapping it up, right? We have 15 days left, right? It's crunch time. But at the same time, we've already won in so many different ways because we have an amazing team that's helped us. And as you know, this is where you learn even more so about your community, what's important to them.
Yeah.
That you thought you already knew, but you hear even more so of it. But then you learn who your friends are, you learn the reasons why they're there, and then people that actually want to do well by the community. So I've learned so much already, but I feel like I've already won in so many different ways because there's a lot of people out there that care for this community. Some people might ask, well, why would you want to do this? I mean, you could do certain other things, right? But I do care.
Yeah.
I do care, and I don't want that monkey on my back when I see, bad decision making still taking place, and I'm not at the table. I could say, well, I tried.
Right.
And I gave it my best. We're working hard, and if it's not in the cards, it's not in the cards. It's not the end of the world, but I tried.
Yeah.
So yes, take time to smell the flowers and don't wish your life away, but absolutely give it your best, whatever it is you're doing.
Awesome. Well, before we end this, go ahead and promote anything you'd like to promote, website, social media, email, anything you'd like to plug out there.
Well, absolutely. I just happen to be running for mayor.
Yeah.
Not only would I be the first woman ever in the history of Santana in 150 years. This year we celebrate the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment that gave the women the right to vote. And the fact that we haven't had a woman mayor in Santana is pretty pathetic in all these years. And we have a very limited number of even women council members. I think we don't get to 10 in all these years. So it's time. But it's also time for qualified leadership, right? And to that extent, I bring all those things to the table. I need you to go out there and vote. Visit my website. We do have a phone number of all of our leadership. Please feel free and either send us a message through Facebook. It's Alvarez for Mayor. And our website is alvarezformayor.com. And of course, you could always call us and let us know. Okay. So make sure you vote. However you feel about anything, please make sure you vote because there's nothing worse than losing an election when people don't show up. Yeah. If everybody shows up and they select someone else, hey, I could live with that.
Yeah, at least we tried, right?
At least we tried. But if it's 3 people showing up, then there's a travesty for our city, right? And of course, I want to promote our DACA students, right? October 19th is Documented Student Week. So to the extent that you know anyone out there that's struggling, because of the challenges we have in the community, but are seeking a higher education, I'll give them a big 5 kudos because they just vote. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks.